Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. Today's story is something that came across my timeline, and I says, "Oh wow, this is kind of cool. I have to talk about this." I know I talk a lot about the situations that Black Brazilians live through in a Brazil that claims it's different from where everywhere else, or just different in terms of its racial politics. And I keep showing that in many ways it's just not. And sometimes because those headlines are big news, or it's just something scandalous, I'll report on that story. But I want to talk about something more positive. I want to talk about something that somebody did, you know, something that says, hey, look, this person did this, means other people can do it. That's often the same thing that a lot of people who, achieve something, they often feel, particularly when they come from a community that's been disenfranchised and, pushed back and held in their place for a while. So when I saw this story, that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because it's just one of those stories that's kind of inspiring that people need to hear. Okay. Black and gifted, seven-year-old boy from Rio de Janeiro's Complexo da Maré completes course offered by Harvard University. 7-year-old black kid from a poor community in Rio de Janeiro. Let's check it out. Let's get directly into this story. So this story was originally called "I Can Use My Superpowers to Learn More," says 7-year-old boy from Complexo da Maré who completed a course offered by Harvard University. The story is brought to you courtesy of Mundo Negro, written by Isadora Santos. So let's go ahead and talk about this. What did this young man accomplish? How did he do it? Let's just go ahead and read his story here. Okay, I see he has a certificate here. So Adriano Álvaro Melo, a seven-year-old boy from Complexo da Maré, or Super Alvinho as he is known, created his own game after completing an online course offered by Harvard University in the United States. The 7-year-old has elevated abilities. Complexo da Maré, known simply as Maré, is a low-income neighborhood located in the north zone of Rio de Janeiro. In his game, narrated in English, a language he learned through an app, he tells the story of an extraordinary scientist. Alvaro expresses his motivation. Now I can use my superpowers to learn more. I want to build agricultural robots and carry out research to improve food production and distribution around the world, he said in an interview with the O Globo newspaper. His interest in agriculture was sparked during a visit to family members in Santana do Manhuaçu, a city located in Minas Gerais state. Okay. Young Alvaro here. When I grow up, I want to work in both agronomy and robotics. The combination of the two could put an end to hunger. Going hungry must be horrible, Alvaro shares, convinced of his mission. The thing I wanted to point out here is that Portuguese is the language spoken in Brazil. This kid learned English through an app. You know, I mean, there's often a question in Brazil about they say Brazil is a meritocracy. And it says that, well, you shouldn't be allowed to have this position if you didn't earn it. So this is one of the main things that people say when the question of affirmative action and quotas come up. Okay. So I just wanted to highlight this story because, again, I feel like both sides have a little bit, to gain, a little bit right, a little bit wrong. In underserved communities, the education is oftentimes just very much lacking. In order to get a better education, Brazilians who can afford it will send their kids to, private schools that are quite, usually pretty expensive. And you go to these private schools, and I have stories coming up of people who experience, like, look, I was the only black kid in the school. I was the only black kid in my class. So this is something very common. So to see a kid make it, do what he did, he actually learned English through an app. And, obviously we know there's a lot of apps out there, but this is just something that it's an inspiring story. Okay. You know, when we live in the United States, we just take for granted that we speak English because that's our first language. But in countries that don't speak English, they know that in order to have a better chance in the job market, at a better career, they have to learn how to speak English. And this kid did this, and he's 7 years old. English classes can be pretty expensive there, depending on what kind of school that you go to. And this kid learned English through an app. That's that's a really inspiring story. He has already accumulated 41 certificates, including 6 SEBRAE agricultural courses. SEBRAE, let me talk about SEBRAE real quick. Anybody who wants to get into businesses, get their business off the ground in Brazil, they'll often be affiliated with SEBRAE. The Serviço Brasileiro de Apoio às Micro e Pequenas Empresas, a Brazilian service of assistance to micro and small enterprises, is an institution supporting the development of small and micro companies in Brazil. The main point of their services is to always achieve a large number of companies with high quality information. Okay. So that's impressive. A 7-year-old kid, he is affiliated with SEBRAE. He learned English through an app. I've said this before, how it's very important when you grow up in the United States or in Britain or other uh, primarily English speaking countries. We take for granted that that it's our first language. But when you're in a country that speaks Spanish or Portuguese or French or German or whatever, but particularly in Latin America, I'll say the Spanish and Portuguese speakers, they know that in order to improve their chances in getting a good paying job, they need to be able to speak English. So that's impressive. The English schools in Brazil can be kind of costly, depending on which one you go to. So again, all the way around, this kid is just very inspiring story. I'm really glad that I came across this story. So one of these courses lasting 32 hours focuses on young entrepreneurs in the countryside. His time is divided between programming, English, chess, and robotics. Recently, Álvaro made his debut as a speaker at the Fluminense Federal University in Rio, sharing his inspiring journey during an event on social pedagogy. Okay, so this is young Álvaro here. Although the Harvard course is free, the certificate of completion costs $299, which is about 1.5 thousand reais, or Brazilian reais. So $1 is still hovering around the 5 real mark, and $1 being worth 5 reais. So understand that that's kind of steep. When the average Brazilian man or woman is probably earning between 2,000 and 2,800 per month or something like that, and then you talk about 1.5 thousand in reais for this certificate completion. Faced with financial difficulties, Álvaro received a scholarship from the institution's assistance program for low-income students. To win this opportunity, the young man had to explain his family's financial situation in English and how the course would contribute to his life goals. The course, taught entirely in English and lasting 3 weeks, has no minimum age requirement, although it is recommended for children over the age of 8. So there's another reason to celebrate this young man. 7 years old, and the course is actually recommended for children who are over the age of 8. So this is a young Álvaro with his mother. His mother's name is Priscila de Melo. Okay. Álvaro's mother, Priscila de Melo, a biologist, recalls that she first became aware of his unusual ability to learn when he was just 3 years old. He wanted to enter a nursery school himself. During the pandemic, at the age of 4, the child began to read and write with the help of the Ministry of Education's Grafo game app, designed for children in the first and second years of elementary school. This is this app right here. We realized that he really did have an unusual level of learning for his age and decided to have him tested for high abilities. At the time, I had to fundraise because it cost 3,000 reais and I couldn't afford it, explains Priscilla. Álvaro attends an evangelical school 3 times a week, takes part in a chess project for children, and is enrolled in a robotics class at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. In addition, this year, he joined a private English course. Without a traditional formal education, he studies at home using a laptop. He wrote his own book about his study methodology, Single Discipline Knowledge of the World. Check that. Okay, so this guy learned English through an app. He's already written his own book, and he got a certificate from Harvard University. I'd say this young man is off to a good start. We looked for solutions, but all the educational institutions we were referred to were incomplete. There was always something missing. They wanted to offer traditional literacy while my son needed additional resources. I even heard racist comments. They questioned our high ability test several times, claiming that he didn't fit the profile of a child with this diagnosis. Keep that phrase in mind. They claimed that he didn't fit the profile of a child with this diagnosis. What would that profile be? A white child? That's why I opted for him to enter the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. For example, in a course aimed at 14-year-olds, he was an exception. In addition, I organize his tasks on a daily basis and review each one, says Priscilla. So this, excellent article up to that point, just all the achievements of a young 7-year-old boy in this poor, like neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro, but always has to be something that just like, okay, well, when does the bad news come in, right? So what I want to focus on was something that was said there. He doesn't fit the profile. Now, the reason why I'm pointing that out is that as long as I've followed the situation of race in Brazil, I always come across this type of story. Uh, Black Brazilians grow up, and in their adult years, they talk about the racist comments that people would make to them. This person has the face of a maid. What does that mean? Well, you don't fit the profile of somebody in this area. I this it's a very typical statement. I remember Diana dos Santos, the world class gymnastics champion. From I don't know, it was about 15 years ago or so, 15, 20 years ago. It's been now, and she talks about how people would tell her, why don't you get into a sport that's made more for your body type? You know, there's kids who talk about studying classical music, like, why don't you go study samba? That's more for your profile. What are you doing? It's like if Black Brazilians are not in an area that Brazil expected to be in, then people say you don't fit the profile. What do they mean by that? I think everybody can kind of figure out what that means. But let's take a look at a couple of examples. Okay, these are all articles where people are talking about, well, you don't fit the profile. This story from 2021. We have to fight 3 times as hard to be heard. Overcoming the odds, Bruna Valim becomes the first Black woman to win the Miss Universe Santa Catarina contest. Now, again, why that's important, Santa Catarina is one of the 3 states in the south of Brazil where 80% of the population in these 3 states classify themselves as white. Okay. So she's in a beauty contest there, you know. But what is she told? I heard a comment that I didn't have the profile of someone from Santa Catarina, that I couldn't be Miss Santa Catarina. Because again, okay, in the south of Brazil, you're expected to be, you're supposed to be white. The profile of the typical person living in those states are you're supposed to be white. So what are you doing winning the Miss Santa Catarina competition? Okay, let's check out another one. Is it because I'm Black, a law degree, studying accounting, and speaks 3 languages? Sorry, you don't fit the profile. I admit that, okay, so this story, again, the accomplishment that this person has or has gained. And what she says, because of being a solitary Black woman in the labor market that can constantly exclude you, hurts too much, that gives you the excuse you don't have the profile, is painful and tiring. So this is something that people hear all the time. You're supposed to stay in the little box that's made for Black people to be in. Here's a story from 2015 where they're talking about 25 privileges that white Brazilians enjoy simply for being white. Number 16 says, if you're white, you don't have to care about passing by a police blockade because you don't have the profile that the police automatically consider suspect. I think we all know what that means. Here's another one. Black doctor from Salvador, Bahia accuses health department of racism. Why? Let's see. 29-year-old doctor graduate from the Federal University of Bahia is accusing the Municipal Health Secretariat of Salvador of practicing racism. The doctor, who is Black and wears her hair in dreadlocks, was told by the directors of the secretariat that she didn't have a profile to provide services at the family health unit of this neighborhood in Salvador, Bahia. When you say to a professional he will have to be transferred from their job because they don't have the profile to work in that place, I mean, again, what is that profile? I mean, do we need any more examples? Okay, let's try one more. Overcoming the odds, the relentless struggle of Black women. These are inequalities These inequalities create within certain professions a racial isolation. Thula said she hears with some regularity comments like, "You don't have the profile of a law professor." So, do we get an idea of what this phrase means? You don't have the profile of this or that. It's because obviously they don't associate people who look black as belonging in certain careers or certain genres that people, certain areas and certain types of jobs, certain neighborhoods are people are not expecting to see black people there. So hence the phrase says you don't have the profile. And in Portuguese, this is okay. So obviously I'm translating a lot of stuff from Portuguese, but what is the phrase that they say in Portuguese? Combating racism, let me see, know the struggle of these black students, right? So in Portuguese, the term is você não tem o perfil da empresa. So this young lady says, what? Since I was little, I always heard my family say, study, you're black, and everything for blacks is more difficult. I already lost various opportunities of being an intern because I was black. What they say is that, quote, você não tem o perfil da empresa. You don't have the profile of the company, says Ana Victoria. Okay. So we know what this means. It's very obvious what it means when it says you don't have the profile. This is another one of those things, where you talk about how does Brazil get away with such racism? Well, they've they've moved the goalpost. They're not going to tell you, well, we're not going to hire you because you're black. They can't do that anymore. Whereas, 50 years ago, it was pretty blatant. They would do that. They would actually have color qualifications in like job ads in the newspaper. We prefer white here. I mean, that's a whole nother thing that I have to talk about. So this is how racism functions these days. And so this is why, even though I love today's article, it always had to be something to just ruin a perfectly, great, inspirational story. It's not like I'm saying this because I wanted to ruin the story, but this is just another example of what Black Brazilians have to go through to get where they have to go. So anyway, I want to, just congratulations to this young man. This is very impressive for a 7-year-old boy. Just goes to show, I mean, when Brazil shuts down half of its population because it's black or black and brown, if you prefer, then it's actually taking away from the possibilities of what Brazil can actually become. That's just my opinion, but curious to know what you guys thought about today's piece with this inspiring young man, 7 years old. Can't wait to see where he's going to be in 15 or 20 years, but curious to know what you guys thought about this. Drop a comment in the comment section, like and share this, definitely like and share this video, consider subscribing to the channel. If you've seen more than a few videos that you liked, click on the notification bell so that you'll be one of the first people to see my videos when I put them up. And with that said, I'm going to end the video here and request that you all come back and check out the next video that I post.